Welcome back, everyone. So today's objective is to be able to evaluate square roots and find perfect squares. But before we go into anything lesson related, I just want to clear out some things that some people have been having trouble with throughout the different Google Classroom assignments. The first thing is that if you go into our classwork tab, some of you guys have been having issues with submitting your work. When we put in a PDF and we put in a Word doc as your assignment, it does not mean that you need to complete your assignment on either the PDF or the Word doc. It's just a way for you to access the assignment. You can always, and we prefer, that you just write down your answers on a separate piece of paper and submit a picture of your work. Sometimes the Word doc, especially with square roots and exponents, can get a little messy and hard for us to understand. So if you just write down your answers on a separate piece of paper and submit your work, it's a lot easier for us to follow. The other thing is, if you are having issues with how to submit your work using a phone or a tablet by submitting an attachment of a picture, there is a section on their classwork that says video tutorials, and there's a link here which will take you to a video that Ms. Mejia recorded for us last year showing you how to submit a picture of your work there in Google Classroom using a tablet or a phone and adding a picture as an attachment. The other thing you can also do, if you don't have a phone or you don't have a tablet and you want to submit a picture using your Chromebook, you can also just go, I'm going to show you using this fake assignment that I made. You can also add or create a Google Doc. It's taking a little long. And inside that Google Doc, you can always insert image and then click on camera, and it'll allow you to use your camera. Let's allow it. Okay, I'm gonna insert a picture of me. You can take this picture, insert it, and it'll take a picture of your work. Okay, so you can insert as many pictures as you want. If you don't have a phone but you have a Chromebook with a camera, you can take your work, put it up to the camera, make sure it's clear to see, take a picture, insert it, and insert as many pictures as you want there. Okay, these are lovely pictures of me. So those are two options that you have in order for you to submit a picture of your work. You do not have to edit a PDF. You do not have to edit the Word doc. You can simply take a picture of what you do by hand, which sometimes is a lot easier when you're using math symbols, and submit a picture of that. Our agenda is pretty much the same as well. You want to make sure you go through the slides, answer your questions on Edpuzzle. We've been grading those, so make sure you are completing them. If your mini lesson or your exit ticket is not complete, or for some reason you do your mini lesson and your exit ticket and not your task, that is an incomplete assignment. You need to do all three parts of the task and the assignment in order for it to be complete. So previously we learned about what square roots look like and what they meant, and we learned that if I gave you something like 3 squared, well, that meant take 3 and multiply it to itself, which then gives me a value of 9. Today we're going to be learning how to do the opposite of squaring a number. We're going to be learning something called finding the square root of a number. And what that looks like is I'm going to be asking you, okay, instead of me giving you a number to square, what if I give you a number like 9 and ask you to work backwards and figure out, okay, what number can I square in order to give me 9 back? And that's essentially what finding the square root of a number means. The square root of a number is a value that when multiplied by itself gives you that number back. So in this case, the square root of 9 is 3, because when I multiply 3 to itself, it'll give me 9 back. Finding the square root of a number, as I mentioned, is the opposite or the inverse operation of squaring something. And this little symbol that we have over here, that is called a radical sign. It's what we use in order to find the square root of any number. So in this case, I would write radical 9 means what is the square root of 9, which in this case is actually equal to 3. And you might hear me use either of these things when I'm pronouncing this symbol. I can say the square root of 9, or I can say radical 9. Both of those things are actually correct. So some other examples. If I ask you to find the square root of 4, like over here, what I'm asking you to figure out, what number can I multiply to itself so that it gives me 4 back? Well, in that case, the only number that I can multiply by to itself, at least the only positive number I can multiply to itself to give me 4 back is 2. So 2 times 2, because 2 times 2 gives me 4. So the square root of 4 is 2. As we just learned, the square root of 9 is equal to 3, because 3 times 3 is equal to 9. And we can continue that same pattern with other numbers. I can say, well, the square root of 16 is equal to 4, because 4 times 4 gives me 16. So based on that pattern, can you guess what the square root of x squared would be? If you said x, you are correct. And you will learn more about how we multiply things with variables and exponents later on in this course. But I can tell you now, to give you a little preview, that the square root of x squared is in fact x, because x times x gives me x squared. Okay, now if you notice, all of them, every time that I took the square root of 4, 9, and 16, they all gave me whole numbers. That's because numbers like 4, 9, and 16, that when you square root them give you a whole number, are called perfect squares. So 4 is a perfect square, not 2, not the value that you get when you square root it, but what's inside of the radical. So 4 is a perfect square, 9 is a perfect square, and 16 is a perfect square, because when I square root them, I get a whole number back. Okay, there's a number that when I multiply to itself will give me that number inside the radical back. And we can continue to make a whole list of all other perfect squares. I already know 1 is a perfect square because 1 times 1 gives me 1. I know 4 is a perfect square because 2 times 2 gives me 4. So it's 9. Can you guess what the next perfect square would be? If you said 16, that's correct, because all you have to do is square the next integer. So in this case, 4 times 4, which gives me 16. The next one would be 5 squared. The next perfect square would be 25, because 5 squared is 5 times 5, which gives me 25. And we can continue to make a list of a bunch of other perfect squares. I can do 6 squared to give me the next one, then I can do 7 squared to give me the next one, and so on and so forth. But how do we find the square root of other numbers that might look a little different or might look a little scary, and we might not necessarily know what two numbers when I multiply them to itself will give me those numbers back? Well, when we have numbers that are a little more challenging in that way, we can always use our graphing calculator to find the square root of those numbers. So in your graphing calculator yesterday during the scavenger hunt, you found, or hopefully you found, the square root option, which is over here by x squared. Now in order to be able to use that square root function, you first have to press second in order to turn the blue buttons on. And once you press second, you get the square root option for you to use, and this pops up into your screen. Okay, so if I want to find the square root of 256, which is our first example, I would press second, x squared, and inside my little box, I'm going to write 256 by selecting those keys on the calculator. And when I press enter, that'll give me a value of 16. So the square root of 256 is 16. Some of you might have known that, or some of you can use the calculator as well to figure that out. So now I want you to go ahead and use your calculator to figure out the square root of 640.09. Great. If you said 25.3, that is correct. Now I want you to do the same thing and figure out the square root of 1/4. And remember to put in a fraction in your calculator. This was also part of your scavenger hunt. All you have to do is press alpha, and then when the n/d function pops up, you can click on that and you can put in your fraction using that. First, you want to put in your square root. So first you're going to put in the square root symbol, or the radical symbol. Once you put in your radical symbol, then you can go ahead and press alpha and D. You will get your two little boxes, And in there you can put in your 1/4. So when you do the square root of 1/4, you actually get a value of 0.5. And that's pretty much all you need to know for today's lesson. How to input square roots into your calculators and do different operations with them, and how to identify something that's a perfect square and something that is not.